Hi all. Before we even begin to understand EKS anywhere, it's imperative to understand that EKS distro, which is actually the core Kubernetes distribution that runs inside of the EKS service in AWS public cloud, has been open sourced. It's in fact available as a GitHub project. And to that note, EKS distro now can be deployed in many different techniques, whether on-premises or as an implicit distribution when it comes to deploying EKS clusters in the public cloud. So with that said, the slide kind of shows, the choices that the customers can make to deploy EKS distro. And in the context of EKS Anywhere, you can see on the left-hand side here, you can take an EKS distro and use your own tools to actually deploy it, through a variety of operating systems on bare metal or virtual machines that reside in your data center or in co-located facilities. Now, to simplify the act of deploying EKS distro on premises or, co-located facilities, outside of open sourcing EKS distro, AWS has also instituted a set of build tooling called as EKS Anywhere. Now, this is another open source project. It's a set of orchestrated tools that actually helps customers simplify the deployment and management of EKS distro in the context of on-premise and managed co-location facilities. So with that said, let me just steer along and talk a little bit more in terms of categories in which we can draw perspectives for EKS Anywhere. Primarily in terms of the software, infrastructure, the costs, the integrations and the services and whatnot. Now, point being that if it comes to software, I've already mentioned that, AWS has open sourced the EKS distro and it runs as a 100% parity solution. So if you actually deploy a Kubernetes version 1.22 inside of EKS on public cloud, versus EKS Anywhere clusters running on premises, you will see the same, EKS distro being deployed on both the clusters. And also note that I've already mentioned that, EKS Anywhere is also an open source project like EKS distro. And in essence, it is a set of bundled tools. And we'll talk about and you'll experience this as we go through the practicalities of deploying EKS Anywhere. So essentially, it's a set of bundled tools that creates the necessary orchestration to deploy and create these EKS distro-based clusters or EKS Anywhere clusters, let's say that, on your vSphere or bare metal environments and whatnot. So the infrastructure that is needed to run EKS Anywhere clusters, it can be either a virtualized or a bare metal infrastructure, which can be located in your own data centers or in co-located premises, which could be managed or unmanaged. The core operating system that runs on the cluster nodes, right? The EKS Anywhere cluster, Kubernetes cluster, the core operating system can be Ubuntu or BottleRocket, which is actually the AWS's own Linux distribution for EKS Anywhere cluster nodes. Now, there are pros and cons of both, I would say, and I would be less biased in this, but point is, BottleRocket has very tight security in terms of the constraints applied. It's firmly fitted to the cause of the EKS Anywhere clusters. So you can't perform any customizations on that operating system. So while you gain a lot of security related aspects in terms of the cluster OS, but there are no customizations that you can actually do. For example, you cannot bring in your self-signed certificates, and if you want to actually install certain packages as per your requirement of third-party tools and whatnot, for various reasons, you can't do that. In Ubuntu, you can do all those customizations, but the challenge remains is that you have to follow a set of procedure for the initial setup to create that OS template, Ubuntu OS template, and then customize that. It's almost a 1-hour job, let's say that. And once you have your template, you can run it in the EKS Anywhere cluster nodes. So obviously there are pros and cons of both of them, and there's a lot of documentation around that. So I'll not go into the details of it. But point is, whether you want to bring in customizations into the OS template or you don't want any customizations in the OS template, right? From a cost perspective, since they are open source, there is as such no cost associated to deploy and run EKS Anywhere clusters. Okay, so this is totally free, basically. Only thing the customers will actually end up in paying for is their own infrastructure and facilities. Now, the only caveat is that if you would like to have the AWS support for EKS Anywhere, then you have to have an AWS enterprise support already signed up for. And then what it also allows you to do is to use certain curated packages of other open source projects. So you can, as a developer or as a DevOps guy, I can always install, things like, an Ingress controller or a Prometheus or whatever, right? So there are a lot of open source utilities. What AWS is trying to do is, it has already come up with this concept of a package controller. So when you install the EKS Anywhere cluster, you can bootstrap your cluster with these curated packages. But the caveat is that you need upfront the AWS enterprise support for EKS Anywhere. Now, in terms of integrations, there's a lot to talk about, but primarily speaking, a lot of times I get asked by the question that, do I need to be hooked on or connected to the AWS cloud to run EKS Anywhere? Is there any major dependency on my AWS public cloud account or the IAM in there or the policies or the budgets or whatever, right? There is as such no need. You can run EKS Anywhere on premises without being connected to the public cloud of AWS. The only, the consideration would be if you want to integrate your EKS Anywhere cluster on a read-only basis with the EKS console in public cloud. Then yes, you do need that level of integration. It's a small act, but in that essence, you need to create certain routines that will allow your EKS console in the public cloud to watch and kind of observe the EKS Anywhere cluster running on premises. So that's the only piece where the dependency could exist actually. Other than that, nothing. Now, in addition, there are a lot of EKS partners, and on the official site of EKS Anywhere, you will see the list of partners who have been traditionally offering services for EKS. They have now started building a, I would say, multitude of offerings which extend beyond the EKS into EKS Anywhere as well. So you will see those solutions also, and it could be across a dimension of, observability or logging, metrics and whatnot, right? Security, all those solutions which existed for EKS, the partners are now building those for EKS Anywhere as such. Now, also, it's important to understand that when you deploy an EKS Anywhere cluster, by default, the CNI, which is actually based on Cilium, and the storage class, if you're deploying it on vSphere, is the vSphere CSI. But it doesn't mean that you can't bring in other sources of CNI or CSI and things like that. So those integrations are made possible through the respective vendors or open source entities providing for those solutions. Now, I've already spoken about the curated packages, so I'm not going to speak about or repeat it again. In terms of the services, AWS definitely provides the day 2 support in terms of having the enterprise engagement and the experience. This could be kind of called upon on various scenarios, right? You have a bug, you have a challenge in terms of deploying EKS Anywhere, or you encounter certain challenges in terms of upgrades and whatnot. So there's a lot that AWS can provide actually for a cost actually. In addition to that, I've seen there are a lot of partners who have been providing day 0, day 1, and day 2 services for EKS as such. They have started building this portfolio and competencies for EKS Anywhere. So that's a summation of how we look at EKS Anywhere from a offering and a platform standpoint. And we will be detailing this out more in a technical construct, let's say, in terms of what's under the hood and things like that. But for now, thanks a lot, and I will close this video. Thank you.